The dust had barely settled on Redemption Creek when Reverend Samuel Hayes saw her standing by the old oak tree behind the church. 20 years had passed since that terrible night, but he would have recognized her silhouette anywhere the way. She held her shoulders just a little too straight, as if carrying the weight of the world. The gentle curve of her neck that used to fit so perfectly against his shoulder. Mary Catherine Thornton. The woman who had once been his everything, and whose absence had nearly destroyed his faith in God and man alike. Samuel's hand trembled as he set down his worn Bible on the church steps. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the cemetery where so many of their shared memories lay buried. He had been preparing his evening sermon, but now the words of Scripture seemed to flee from his mind like startled birds. She turned slowly, as if sensing his presence, and their eyes met across 20 years of silence and heartbreak. Her dark hair, once long and wild, was now pinned back properly beneath a simple bonnet. But those green eyes, those eyes that had haunted his dreams, remained unchanged, beautiful and wounded, just as they had been the night she disappeared. Samuel, her voice was barely a whisper, carried on the evening breeze. He wanted to run to her, to close the distance that had stretched between them for 2 decades. Instead, he found himself frozen, remembering the last time they had stood together, remembering the choice he had made and the price they had both paid. "Mary Catherine," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. I thought you were dead." A sad smile flickered across her lips. "In many ways I was." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and buried pain. Samuel could hear the distant lowing of cattle and the creak of the church weather vane. But all he could focus on was the woman before him, the woman he had loved more than his own salvation, and had lost because of his own weakness. "Why did you come back?" he asked, though his heart already knew the answer he hoped for. Mary Catherine's hands fidgeted with the faded ribbon on her reticule, a nervous habit he remembered well. "My father is dying, Samuel. He sent for me. Judge Thornton. The man who had torn them apart with threats and ultimatums, who had made it clear that a poor preacher's son would never be worthy of his daughter's hand." Samuel felt the old anger rise in his chest, but it was tempered now by years of learning forgiveness, though he had never quite managed to forgive himself. "I'm sorry to hear that," Samuel said, and meant it. "He's been a pillar of this community. For many years, has he?" There was something bitter in her tone that made Samuel look at her more closely. Lines of weariness etched the corners of her eyes. And he noticed now how carefully she held herself, as if protecting old wounds. "Mary Catherine, what happened to you? Where have you been all these years?" She looked away toward the setting sun that painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "I went where he sent me, to his sister in Philadelphia. She found me. A suitable husband." The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. Of course she had married. A woman like Mary Catherine wouldn't have remained alone. But hearing it spoken aloud made the loss feel fresh again, like a wound that had never properly healed. "I hope you were happy," he said quietly, though the words felt like broken glass in his throat. "Happy." She repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. "Thomas was a good man, a banker, respectable. Everything my father wanted for me." She paused, her voice growing softer. "He died 3 years ago. Consumption. I'm sorry. Are you?" She turned back to him, and there was something fierce in her green eyes now. "Is you really, Samuel? Because I've spent 20 years wondering. If you ever thought about me, if you ever regretted letting my father drive us apart." The accusation hit its mark, and Samuel felt heat rise in his cheeks. Regretted it. "Mary Catherine, there hasn't been a single day, then why didn't you fight for me?" The words burst from her like a dam breaking. "I waited, Samuel. I waited for you to come after me, to tell my father that you wouldn't let him separate us. But you never came." Samuel closed his eyes, remembering that terrible night 20 years ago. Judge Thornton had summoned him to his study, had made it clear in no uncertain terms that Samuel would never be allowed to marry his daughter. The threat had been implicit but unmistakable. Pursue Mary Catherine and face ruin, not just for himself but for his ailing parents, for the small church that depended on him. "I was a coward," he admitted, the words tasting like ash. "You're made it clear that if I pursued you, he would destroy my family. My father was sick, Mary Catherine. My mother had no one else. The church, she interrupted, her voice sharp. Always the church with you, Samuel? Even then? It's not fair. You know it was more than that. I was 23 years old, barely scraping by. What could I have offered you? Yourself, she said simply. That's all I ever wanted. The words hung between them like a bridge neither dared to cross. Samuel felt the weight of 20 years of loneliness, of nights spent wondering what might have been, of sermons about love and forgiveness, while his own heart remained unhealed. I loved you, he said quietly. I loved you so much it nearly killed me to let you go. Then why? Because I thought I was doing what was best for you. The words erupted from him with 20 years of pent-up anguish. Your father was right. About one thing, I had nothing to offer you but a hard life in a frontier town. You deserved better. You deserved silk dresses and fine houses, and I deserved to choose for myself. Mary Catherine said, her voice trembling with emotion. I deserved to have the man I loved fight for me, not decide what was best for me like I was a child. They stared at each other across the gathering dusk. Two people who had loved each other and lost each other to pride and fear and the cruel machinations of others. Samuel could see the pain in her eyes, pain he had put there, and it broke what was left of his heart. I made the wrong choice, he whispered. God forgive me. I've regretted it every day since. Something shifted in Mary Catherine's expression, the anger giving way to a deeper sadness. I know you have. I could see it in your letters to my cousin Emma. She showed them to me, you know. The ones where you asked about me in that careful way, like you were afraid to say my name outright. Samuel felt heat rise in his cheeks. He had indeed written to Emma Bradshaw, Mary Catherine's cousin, who had remained in Redemption Creek, asking casual questions that he hoped would yield some news of the woman he couldn't forget. I shouldn't have. No. You should have written to me directly. You should have come after me yourself. Her voice was soft now, but firm. But I understand why you didn't. I've had 20 years to understand. The evening breeze stirred the leaves of the oak tree above them, and Samuel caught the faint scent of the roses that grew wild along the creek bank. It was the same perfume Mary Catherine had worn as a young woman. The memory hit him with unexpected force, dancing with her at the church social, walking her home under a canopy of stars. The night he had almost kissed her by this very tree before propriety and fear had held him back. I tried to hate you, Mary Catherine said quietly. It would have been easier. Thomas knew, you know. He could tell I had loved someone else. He never said anything, but he knew. He was kind to me, Samuel. Gave me a good life, a comfortable life, but it wasn't. It wasn't the life I had dreamed of. What kind of life had you dreamed of? Samuel asked, though he feared the answer. A wistful smile crossed her lips. A little house by the creek. A garden where I could grow vegetables and flowers. Children with their father's kind eyes and stubborn streak. Simple things, Samuel. I never wanted grand things. The picture she painted was so vivid, so achingly familiar, that Samuel had to grip the church railing to steady himself. It was the same dream he had carried all these years, the same future they had whispered about in stolen moments, when the world seemed full of possibility. We could have been happy, she continued. Poor, maybe, but happy. Instead, you chose. Duty over love, and I chose to obey rather than fight. We were so young, Samuel said. We thought we had to choose between love and responsibility. We didn't understand that sometimes the most responsible thing you can do is follow your heart. And now we're old, and it's too late. The finality in her voice sent a chill through. Samuel, is it really too late, Mary Catherine? She looked at him with eyes that held 20 years of sorrow. I don't know, Samuel. I honestly don't know. Not the same woman who left here. The things I've seen, the things I've endured, they've changed me. What things? He asked gently. What happened to you in Philadelphia? Mary Catherine was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was barely audible. My husband was. Thomas was a good man, but he had his struggles. The bottle, mostly. And when he drank, he became someone else entirely. someone angry and cruel. Samuel felt a cold fury rise in his chest. Did he hurt you? Not at first. At first, he was the perfect gentleman my father had chosen for me. But as the years went by, as it became clear that I would never love him the way he wanted to be loved, he grew resentful. The drinking got worse. And when people drink that much for that long, she trailed off, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Mary Catherine, I'm so sorry. If I had known, what would you have done? You were here, building your life, your ministry. You had made your choice. I would have come for you, Samuel said fiercely. No matter what it cost me, I would have come for you. Would you? She studied his face in the dying light. Or would you have written me a letter, full of sympathy and prayers? The question stung because Samuel wasn't entirely sure of the answer. The man he had been 20 years ago might indeed have hidden behind duty and propriety, but the man he was now tempered by loss and loneliness and hard-won wisdom, that man, would have moved heaven and earth to protect her. I like to think I would have been braver, he said honestly, but I can't know for certain. I can only tell you that the man I am now would never let anyone hurt you. Something flickered in Mary Catherine's eyes, hope, perhaps, or merely exhaustion, you're saying. The man you are now is a preacher, Samuel, a respected member of the community. Can't afford to be associated with a woman like me. What do you mean? A woman like you? A widow with a questionable reputation? Oh yes, the rumors followed me even here. They say, I drove my husband to drink, that I was an unnatural wife. Some even whisper that I had a hand in his death. Samuel felt his anger flare again. That's nonsense. Anyone who knows you would know. No one here knows me anymore, Samuel. I'm not the innocent girl who left 20 years ago. I'm a woman who has seen the worst of what men can do, who has had to make choices no woman should have to make just to survive. The weight of her words settled between them, and Samuel began to understand the true cost of their separation. It wasn't just 20 years of loneliness they had both endured. It was 20 years of becoming people they had never intended to be. Tell me, he said gently. Whatever it is, whatever you've done or had to do, tell me. Mary Catherine looked toward the church, its white steeple stark against the darkening sky. Thomas died on a Tuesday. The doctor said his liver finally gave out, that it was a mercy really, considering how he'd been suffering. But the day before he died, he told me something about my father. She paused and Samuel waited, sensing that whatever came next would change everything. He told me that my father had paid him to marry me. $5,000 plus a business partnership. I wasn't a bride, Samuel. I was a transaction. The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. He had known Judge Thornton was a hard man, a controlling man, but to sell his own daughter? My God, he whispered. There's more. Mary Catherine's voice was steady now, as if she had been carrying these secrets so long they had worn smooth. Thomas was already married when he wed me. His first wife was in an asylum back east, declared insane by her family when she tried to leave him. Our marriage was a lie from the beginning. Samuel felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Everything he had believed about Mary Catherine's life, everything he had told himself to justify his cowardice, had been built on deception. Mary Catherine, I'm so sorry. I'm so terribly sorry. Don't be sorry, Samuel. Be angry. Be as angry as I've been. All these years. Because while I was trapped in a sham marriage with a man who saw me as property, you were here preaching about love and forgiveness and God's plan. Do you see the irony? Samuel did see it, and it made him sick. While he had been counseling other couples, performing wedding ceremonies, speaking about the sanctity of marriage, the woman he loved had been living a nightmare. Why didn't you leave him? He asked. Why didn't you come home? With what money? To what home? My father had made it clear I was dead to him if I didn't comply with his wishes. And even if I'd found a way to leave, who would have believed? Me, a hysterical woman claiming her respectable husband was a fraud? Thomas had powerful friends, influential connections. I would have been the one locked away in an asylum. The full horror of her situation became clear to Samuel, and with it came a rage unlike anything he had ever felt. Judge Thornton hadn't just separated to young lovers, He had condemned his own daughter to years of abuse and degradation. "How did you survive it?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "I made myself small," she said simply. "I learned to be invisible, to anticipate his moods, to never give him cause for anger. I became a ghost in my own life. And I held on to the memory of what real love felt like, even when I thought I'd never feel it again." They stood in silence as full darkness settled over the town. In the distance, Samuel could hear the sounds of evening dogs barking, children being called in for supper, the creak of settling buildings. Normal sounds of normal lives, so different from the tragedy they were discussing. "Your father?" Samuel said finally. "You said he sent for you." "Yes, 3 months ago. A letter saying he was dying and wanted to make amends. I almost didn't come. After Thomas died, I thought about simply disappearing, going somewhere no one knew me, starting over completely." "What changed your mind?" "Curiosity, I suppose. And perhaps a foolish hope that he might finally admit what he had done, might finally apologize for destroying so many lives. And has he?" Mary Catherine's laugh was bitter. "He's dying, Samuel, but he's still the same man. Still believes he did what was best for me. He still thinks you weren't good enough for his daughter." Samuel felt that familiar mix of anger and inadequacy that Judge Thornton had always inspired in him. But now it was tempered by something else, a recognition that the old man's opinion no longer mattered. "Maybe I wasn't good enough for you then," Samuel said slowly. "But I'd like to think I've become a better man over the years." "You were always good enough," Mary Catherine said fiercely. "That was never the issue, and we both know it. The issue was that my father couldn't bear the thought of his daughter marrying beneath her station. And you couldn't bear to disappoint anyone, even at the cost of our happiness." The accusation was fair, and Samuel didn't try to deny it. "You're right. I was so concerned with doing what others expected of me that I forgot to ask what I expected of myself." "Hey, what do you expect of yourself now, Samuel?" It was a crucial question, and Samuel found himself thinking not just about Mary Catherine, but about the 20 years that had passed since she left. He had built a good life in Redemption Creek, had ministered to the sick and dying, had married dozens of young couples, had baptized their children and buried their parents. He had been a fixture in the community, reliable and steady and utterly alone. "I expect myself to be honest," he said finally, "to stop hiding behind duty and propriety when what I really want is standing right in front of me." Mary Catherine studied his face in the moonlight. "And what do you want, Samuel?" "You," he said simply. "I've always wanted you. Every day for 20 years I've wanted you. Even knowing what I've become. Even knowing that people will talk, that your reputation might suffer. Especially knowing what you've become," Samuel said, moving closer to her. "You survived something that would have broken a lesser woman. You endured years of abuse and came out stronger. You're not the innocent girl who left here, Mary Catherine, and I'm not the cowardly boy who let you go. Maybe that's exactly why we deserve a second chance." "The church won't approve," she warned. "A preacher taking up with a woman of questionable reputation? Then they can find themselves another preacher." Samuel said, surprised by his own vehemence. "I've spent 20 years serving everyone else's expectations. Maybe it's time I served my own heart." Mary Catherine stared at him, and Samuel could see the war being fought in her green eyes, hope battling against fear, love struggling against the pain of old wounds. "I'm not sure I remember how to love someone," she whispered. "It's been so long since I was allowed to feel anything real." "Then we'll learn together," Samuel said, reaching out to touch her face gently. "We'll take it slow, give ourselves time to heal, time to become the people we were meant to be." "You make it sound so simple." "Maybe it is simple. Maybe we've been making it complicated all these years." Mary Catherine leaned into his touch, and Samuel felt something inside his chest loosen for the first time in decades. This was what he had been missing. What no amount of prayer or service or good works had been able to replace the simple, profound connection with another human soul. "My father will be furious," she said, but there was something almost like amusement in her voice. "Let him be," Samuel replied. "He's had his say in your life. Now it's your turn to choose. And if I choose you, what then? Do we pretend the last 20 years never happened?" Do we try to become the young couple we once were? No, Samuel said. Firmly, we honor what we've been through. We let it make us stronger, wiser, more grateful for what we have. We don't try to recapture the past. We build something new. Mary Catherine was quiet for a long moment, and Samuel could almost hear her thinking, weighing possibilities against past pain. I have conditions, she said finally. Name them. I won't be hidden away like a shameful secret. If we do this, if we try again, it has to be in the open. I'm tired of living in shadows, agreed. Agreed. And I won't be molded into someone else's idea of what a preacher's wife should be. I've spent too many years being what other people wanted. If you want me, you have to want me as I am. I wouldn't have you any other way. And I want to help people, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Women like me who are trapped in bad situations. I want to use what I've learned, what I've survived, to help others. Samuel felt a surge of admiration for this woman, who had endured so much and still wanted to give back to the world. The church could use someone with your experience and compassion, even if it makes people uncomfortable. Even if they whisper about the preacher's wife who speaks too openly. About difficult things? Let them whisper, Samuel said. God's work isn't always comfortable. Mary Catherine smiled then, and it was like watching the sun rise after a long, cold night. You have changed, Samuel Hayes. The man I knew 20 years ago would never have. Said that the woman I knew 20 years ago would never have needed to hear it, he replied. We've both been tested by fire, Mary Catherine.
Maybe.
That's made us worthy of each other at last. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could see the silver threads in her dark hair, the fine lines around her eyes that spoke of years of struggle. She was more beautiful now than she had been at 18. Beautiful in the way that only comes from surviving life's worst blows and still choosing to love. Are you sure about this? She asked. Once we take this step, there's no going back. Your life will change forever. Samuel thought about his quiet, orderly existence, his predictable routines, his safe, solitary life. Then he thought about the alternative years stretching ahead without her, empty of the love that had sustained him through the darkest times, hollow with the echo of what might have been. My life changed forever the day you left, he said. I've just been waiting for it to change back. And then, finally, after 20 years of regret and longing and carefully maintained distance, Samuel Hayes kissed Mary Catherine Thornton under the old oak tree behind the church. It was a kiss that tasted of tears and forgiveness, of second chances and hard-won wisdom, of love that had been tested by time and found unbreakable. When they finally broke apart, both were crying. I missed you, Mary Catherine whispered against his cheek. Every day, I missed you. I'm here now, Samuel replied, pulling her closer. We're both here, and this time I'm not letting you go. Above them, the stars wheeled across the vast frontier sky, bearing witness to a love that had survived separation and betrayal, abuse and despair. It wasn't the innocent romance of their youth, but something deeper and more precious, a mature love built on understanding, forgiveness, and the hard-won knowledge that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Samuel Hayes married Mary Catherine Thornton in a simple ceremony in the little white church where he had preached for 20 years. Judge Thornton did not attend. He had died the week before, taking his secrets and his bitterness to the grave. But the church was full of people who had come to witness something rare and beautiful. Two souls finding their way back to each other after a lifetime apart. As Samuel spoke the words that bound them together at last, he thought about the sermon he had been preparing that first evening when Mary Catherine returned. It had been about redemption, about second chances, about the mysterious ways in which God writes straight with crooked lines. He had never finished that sermon, but he was living it now, every day. In the arms of the woman he had loved and lost and found again, and in a little house by the creek, surrounded by the garden, Mary Catherine planted that first spring. They built the life they had dreamed of as young lovers, simple, honest, and filled with the kind of love that transforms not just to hearts, but everyone it touches. For love, Samuel learned, is never really lost. It only waits, patient and faithful, for the moment when two souls are finally brave enough to claim it. Spring had come early to Redemption Creek, teening the prairie in. Shades of green that reminded Samuel Hayes of his wife's eyes. 6 months had passed since their wedding. 6 months of quiet happiness in the little house by the creek where Mary Catherine's garden bloomed with vegetables and wildflowers alike. But as Samuel walked home from the church that evening, his steps were heavy with the weight of what he had learned. The town council meeting had been brutal. Reverend Hayes Ezra Morrison had begun, his voice carrying the authority of a man who owned half the businesses in town. "We need to discuss your domestic situation." Samuel had known this moment would come. The whispers had been growing, louder ever since Martha Henley arrived from Philadelphia 3 weeks ago, bringing with her a collection of rumors and half-truths that had set the town ablaze with gossip. "My wife and I are very happy. Thank you for asking," Samuel had replied evenly, though his hands were clenched beneath the table. "That's just it," Reverend Ezra had continued, his pale eyes gleaming with sanctimonious fervor. "We have it on good authority that she may not actually be your wife at all." The words had hit Samuel like a physical blow, though he had tried not to let it show. He had known that Mary Catherine's first marriage had been invalid. Thomas Brennan had still been married to another woman when he wed her. But Samuel had hoped that particular detail would remain buried in Philadelphia. "What exactly are you suggesting, Ezra?" "I'm suggesting," Morrison had said, leaning forward with the air of a man delivering a killing blow, "that you are living in sin with a woman who was never legally divorced from her first husband. I'm suggesting that this so-called marriage is a mockery of everything this church stands for." The other council members had shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Most of them had known Samuel for years, had respected his ministry, but the weight of scandal was heavy in the room. Furthermore, Morrison had continued, clearly enjoying himself, "Martha Henley tells us that your wife was suspected of hastening her husband's death, something about withholding his medication during his final illness." Samuel had felt the blood drain from his face. Mary Catherine had told him about Thomas's final days, about how she had finally found the courage to stop enabling his drinking, to stop providing the laudanum that was slowly killing him. It had been an act of desperate love, not malice, but he could see how it might be twisted into something sinister. "These are serious allegations," Dr. William Patterson had said quietly. Patterson was a good man, one of the few on the council. Samuel considered a friend, if they're true, ... "They're not true," Samuel had said firmly. "And even if there were irregularities in Philadelphia, Mary Catherine and I were married legally here by Judge Crawford with proper witnesses. Our marriage is valid under territorial law, is it?" Morrison had smiled coldly. "Because I've been doing some research, Reverend. Seems that bigamy, even unknowing bigamy, can void subsequent marriages, makes them adulterous relationships in the eyes of God and the law." Samuel had left the meeting with a formal ultimatum. He had 30 days to resolve his domestic situation or face removal from his position. 30 days to choose between his calling and his wife, between his community and his heart. Now, as he approached the little house where lamplight glowed warm in the windows, Samuel tried to find the words to tell Mary Catherine what had happened. She was waiting for him on the front porch as she did every evening, her face lighting up at the sight of him in a way that still took his breath away. "You're late tonight," she said, rising to kiss his cheek. But her smile faded as she saw his expression. "Samuel? What's wrong?" He took her hands in his, feeling how cold they had grown in the evening air. "We need to talk." Mary Catherine's face went very still. In the months they had been married, Samuel had learned to read her moods, to recognize the way she braced herself when trouble approached. It was a habit born of years of survival, and it broke his heart every time he saw it. "It's about Philadelphia, isn't it?" she said quietly. "Someone's been talking. Martha Henley arrived in town 3 weeks ago. She's been ... sharing stories." "Eerie." Catherine closed her eyes briefly. "What kind of stories?" "She's telling people that your marriage to Thomas was valid, that our marriage is therefore illegal. She's also suggesting that you may have contributed to Thomas's death." To Samuel's surprise, Mary Catherine didn't seem shocked or frightened. Instead, she seemed almost relieved, as if a weight she had been carrying had finally been acknowledged. "I wondered when this would happen," she said, sinking back into her chair. "Martha was Thomas's sister. She never liked me, always believed I had trapped her precious brother into marriage. Mary Catherine, I need you to tell me the truth. Of it, was your marriage to Thomas legal?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the creek where fireflies were beginning to dance above the water. "Legally? Yes, it was legal. Thomas's first wife had been declared dead by the courts. After she disappeared from the asylum, the marriage was valid, even if it was based on lies." Samuel felt his heart sink. "Then our marriage, it's also legal," Mary Catherine said firmly. "Was a widow when I married you, Samuel, free to choose my own fate for the first time in 20 years. But if there are questions about how Thomas died—" Mary Catherine turned to look at him, and in her eyes Samuel saw a strength that humbled him. "Do you want to know what really happened during Thomas's final weeks?" Samuel nodded, though part of him feared what he might hear. "Thomas was dying, Samuel. His liver was failing, his body was shutting down, and he was in constant pain. The doctor prescribed laudanum for the pain, but Thomas wasn't taking it for pain. He was using it to chase away the demons that alcohol couldn't touch anymore." She paused, her voice steady despite the tears that had begun to fall. "I watched him for 3 years as he slowly killed himself with drink and drugs. I watched him become a stranger, a shadow of the man I had married. And finally, in those last weeks, I made a choice. I stopped giving him the laudanum. I held him while he suffered through the withdrawal. I bathed his fevered brow. I stayed with him while he faced the pain he had been running from for so long, Mary Catherine. He died clean, Samuel. For the first time in years, his mind was clear when he passed. He thanked me. He asked God to forgive him for what he had done to me, to us. He died at peace, and I helped him find that peace." Samuel reached for her, pulling her into his arms as she wept against his shoulder. This woman, who had endured so much, who had shown such courage in the face of impossible choices, was being vilified by people who had never faced such trials. "I believe you," he whispered into her hair. "I believe every word." "But others won't," Mary Catherine said, pulling back to look at him. "Martha has always believed I was a fortune hunter who trapped her brother. She'll never believe that I acted out of love." "What do you want to do?" Samuel asked. "We could leave Redemption Creek, start over somewhere else. I could find another church, another community that doesn't know our history." Mary Catherine was quiet for a long moment, and Samuel could almost see her thinking, weighing their options against the cost of each choice. "Is that what you want?" she asked finally. "To run away again?" The question cut deep because Samuel recognized the truth in it. Running away was what he had done 20 years ago in his own way. He had chosen the safe path, the path of least resistance, and it had cost them both dearly. "No," he said quietly. "I don't want to run. I want to fight for what we have, for what we've built here. I need to know that you're willing to fight too." Mary Catherine stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the town where they had found their second chance. In the distance, the church steeple rose against the starlit sky, a symbol of everything Samuel might lose if he chose to stand by her. 20 years ago, I let my father and society make my choices for me," she said. "I was young and scared, and I believed that other people knew better than I did what was best for my life. I won't make that mistake again." She turned back to Samuel, and in the lamplight, her face was resolute. "I won't ask you to give up your calling for me, Samuel. If the church means more to you than our marriage, I'll understand. I'll leave quietly, and you can rebuild your reputation." "Don't," Samuel said fiercely, standing to face her. "Out. Don't you dare give me an easy way out. I spent 20 years taking easy ways out, and it nearly destroyed us both." "Then what are you saying?" "I'm saying that my calling isn't to that building down the street or to the opinions of small-minded men like Ezra Morrison. My calling is to love, to serve, to do God's work in the world. And God's work doesn't stop just because some people disapprove of who I've chosen to love." Mary Catherine stared at him, and Samuel could see the hope warring with fear in her expression. "I'll remove you from the church," she warned. "You'll lose everything you've built here." "No," Samuel said, reaching for her hands again. "I'll lose a job. But I won't lose my faith. I won't lose my purpose, and I won't lose you. Those are the things that matter. And how will we live? How will we survive if you're not the preacher? Any more? Samuel smiled. And for the first time that evening, it was genuine. The same way thousands of other couples survive on the frontier. With hard work, determination, and love, I can teach school, or help Doc Patterson, or work for one of the ranchers. We'll find a way. Mary Catherine was crying now, but they were tears of relief rather than despair. Are you sure? Are you absolutely certain? Because once we make this choice, once we defy them openly, there's no going back. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, Samuel said. I lost you once because I was too afraid to fight for what was right. I won't make that mistake again. The next morning, Samuel stood in his pulpit for what he knew might be the last time and delivered the sermon of his life. The church was packed. Word of the scandal had drawn curious onlookers from miles around, all eager to see how the drama would unfold. Samuel looked out at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some hostile, most simply curious. He saw Ezra Morrison in the front row, his expression smugly expectant. Saw Dr. Patterson and his wife worry etched on their kind faces. And in the back, sitting straight and proud despite the whispers around her, he saw Mary Catherine. Shh. Friends, Samuel began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed church, I want to talk to you today about love. Not the easy love we feel for those who approve of us, who make our lives comfortable, but the difficult love that calls us to stand by those who need us most. A murmur ran through the congregation. This was not the humble apology they had expected. 20 years ago, I stood in this very pulpit and preached about duty, about doing what was expected of us, about following the rules that society sets for us. I was a young man then, convinced that righteousness meant never making waves, never challenging authority, never risking disapproval. Samuel paused, his eyes finding Mary Catherine's across the crowded room. I was wrong. Confused cowardice with virtue, and it cost me, and someone I loved very dearly, 20 years of happiness. The whispers grew louder, but Samuel pressed on. Some of you know that my wife and I were separated for many years. What you may not know is that she spent those years trapped in a marriage that was built on deception and maintained through abuse. While I was here, safe in my respectability, she was learning lessons about survival that no woman should have to learn. Ezra Morrison half rose from his seat. Reverend Hayes, this is hardly appropriate. Sit down, Ezra, Samuel said quietly, but with enough authority to make the older man comply. Not finished. Samuel stepped down from the pulpit, walking among the pews as he spoke. My wife has been accused of terrible things by people who don't know her, who have never walked in her shoes. She's been called a fortune hunter, a murderess, an adulteress. And why? Because she had the courage to make difficult choices too. Act with love even when that love demanded sacrifice. He stopped walking, standing in the center aisle where everyone could see him clearly. The woman I married watched her husband destroy himself with alcohol and laudanum. She could have let him continue, could have taken the easy path, and simply waited for the inevitable end. Instead, she chose to help him face his demons, to die with dignity rather than in a haze of artificial peace. She chose the harder path, the loving path, and for that, she's been vilified. Samuel could see that his words were having an effect. Some faces were softening, beginning to look thoughtful rather than judgmental. I have been told that I must choose between my calling and my wife, between my reputation and my conscience. But I reject that choice entirely. My calling is not to this building or to your approval. My calling is to love without condition, to serve without reservation, to stand with those who need standing with. He walked back toward the pulpit, but didn't climb the steps. If you cannot accept that the man you chose as your spiritual leader has chosen to love a woman who has survived more than any of us can imagine, then you are free to find another preacher. But you will not find one who loves more deeply or serves more faithfully than the woman you're asking me to abandon. Samuel turned to look at Mary Catherine, who was crying openly now. Mary Catherine Brennan Hayes is my wife, my partner, and my greatest blessing. She has shown me what real faith looks like, not the easy faith of comfortable circumstances, but the hard faith that continues to love even in the face of cruelty. She has made me a better man, a better preacher, and a better servant of God." The church was completely silent now, every person hanging on Samuel's words. "So here's my choice, freely made. I choose love over fear, courage over comfort, truth over reputation. I choose my wife, and I choose to serve God in whatever capacity He calls me to, whether that's from this pulpit, or from the schoolhouse, or from our little home by the creek." Samuel walked to the back of the church, took Mary Catherine's hand, and turned to face the congregation together. "If anyone here cannot accept that choice, I understand, but I will not apologize for it, and I will not hide from it. This is who I am, and this is who we are together." For a long moment, the church was absolutely quiet. Then, slowly, Dr. Patterson stood up. His wife joined him, then the Hendersons. From the Mercantile, then old Mrs. Kowalski, who had lost her husband the previous winter. One by one, more than half the congregation rose to their feet, but not everyone. Ezra Morrison remained seated, his face flushed with anger. Several other prominent families stayed in their pews, their expressions ranging from disapproving to openly hostile. Samuel nodded, understanding. The community was divided, just as he had known it would be. But the division was not as stark as he had feared, and the support was stronger than he had dared hope. "Thank you," he said simply to those who were standing. As the congregation filed out, some stopping to shake Samuel's hand or speak quietly to Mary Catherine, others leaving without acknowledgement, Samuel felt a strange peace settle over him. He had made his choice, publicly and irrevocably. Whatever came next, he would face it honestly. Dr. Patterson was among the last to leave, pausing beside Samuel and Mary Catherine at the church door. "That was quite a sermon, Samuel," he said quietly. "Quite a sermon indeed. Thank you, William, I expect. The council will meet again this week to discuss your situation." Samuel nodded. "I expect they will." "For what it's worth," Patterson said, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard, "I think you're a braver man than I am. I think your wife is lucky to have someone willing to fight for her." After everyone had gone, Samuel and Mary Catherine walked home in the golden afternoon sunlight. Neither spoke until they reached their front porch. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Mary Catherine asked as they settled into their chairs. Samuel considered the question seriously. "I think we did the only thing we could do and still live with ourselves. Even if it costs you the church, Mary Catherine. I've been preaching for 20 years about faith, about love, about standing up for what's right. Today was the first time I actually practiced what I've been preaching. If that costs me the church, then maybe I never deserved it in the first place." Mary Catherine reached for his hand. "I love you, Samuel Hayes, not because you're willing to sacrifice for me, but because you've finally learned that some things are worth sacrificing for. What have I learned is worth sacrificing for?" She smiled, and it was like watching the sun come out from behind clouds. Truth, love, the chance to live an honest life with an honest heart, the chance to be the man God actually made you to be instead of the man everyone else expected you to become. Samuel squeezed her hand. "Is that what kind of man did God make me to be? The kind who marries wounded women and loves them back to wholeness?" Mary Catherine said softly. "The kind who sees past reputation to character, past scandal to truth. The kind who finally understands that real faith isn't about following rules. It's about following your heart when your heart is pointed toward love." 3 days later, the church council voted to remove Samuel as pastor of the Redemption Creek Community Church. The vote was close for 2-3 but decisive. Ezra Morrison delivered the news personally, clearly relishing his victory. "You brought this on yourself, Hayes," he said, standing in the doorway of the little house by the creek. "You had a choice, and you chose poorly." "No, Ezra," Samuel replied calmly. "I had a choice, and I chose love. If you can't see the difference, then you're the one who chose poorly." But as Morrison's buggy disappeared down the dusty road, Samuel felt a stab of fear. He had made his grand gesture, had stood up for principle and love, but now the reality was setting in. He had no job, no income, and no clear path forward. Mary Catherine found him sitting on the porch steps an hour later, staring at the creek without really seeing it. Having second thoughts, she asked gently. "What about you?" Samuel said immediately. "Never about you. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't worried about how we're going to manage." Mary Catherine sat beside him on the steps. "Do you remember what I told you that first night about wanting to help other women?" Samuel nodded. "Well, I've been thinking about that, about what I could do, what skills I have that might be useful." "What kind of skills?" Mary Catherine smiled, but it was a different kind of smile than he was used to seeing, more determined, more businesslike. "I spent 20 years learning how to manage a household on very little money. I know how to stretch food, how to make clothes last, how to find work when there seems to be none available. I know how to read people, how to spot the ones who might help and the ones who might hurt you. Most importantly, I know how to survive." Samuel began to see where she was going with this. "You want to help other women learn those skills? More than that, I want to create a place where women who are in the kind of situation I was in can come for help. Not just a place to hide, but a place to learn how to build new lives." The idea was ambitious, maybe even impossible. But Samuel found himself getting excited about it despite their precarious circumstances. "Where would you do this? How would you support it?" "There's an old house about a mile outside of town," Mary Catherine said. "The widow Jenkins' place. It's been empty since she passed 2 years ago, and her son in California has been trying to sell it. I was thinking we could buy it cheap, fix it up, turn it into a kind of ... refuge." "With what money?" Mary Catherine was quiet for a moment, then reached into her reticule and pulled out a small leather pouch. She handed it to Samuel, who opened it to find more money than he had ever seen in one place, gold coins and bills that added up to several $1,000s. "Where did this come from?" he asked, stunned. "Thomas left me more than I told you about," she admitted. "I was afraid that if you knew I had money, you might think I was trying to buy your affection or that I didn't need you. But the truth is, I have enough to buy the Jenkins place, enough to support us while we get started, enough to make this dream real." Samuel stared at the money, then at his wife. "You've been planning this. I've been hoping for it. I've been praying that God might give me a way to turn my suffering into something useful, something that could help other women avoid what I went through. And you want me to help you? I want you to help me help them, not as a preacher necessarily, but as a man who understands love and forgiveness and second chances. These women will need to hear that they're worthy of love, that their past doesn't define their future, that there are good men in the world who won't hurt them." Samuel felt something shift inside his chest, a sense of purpose that was different from what he had felt in the pulpit, but no less powerful. "It won't be easy," he warned.
Ow!
"People will talk. Will say we're encouraging women to abandon their husbands, that we're undermining the natural order of things."
"Let them talk,"
Mary Catherine said firmly. "I'm done caring what people think. When lives are at stake." Samuel looked at his wife, freely looked at her hand, saw not just the woman he loved, but a partner in the truest sense of the word, someone who shared his values, his desire to serve, his willingness to sacrifice comfort for conscience. "All right," he said, standing and pulling her up with him. "Let's go look at this house." The widow Jenkins' place was larger than Samuel had remembered, a 2-story farmhouse with good bones but years of neglect. As they walked through the empty rooms, Mary Catherine's excitement was infectious. "We could put beds here," she said, gesturing to what had been the main parlor. "Kitchen over there for communal meals. Upstairs could be private rooms for women who need more time, more healing." "What about children?" Samuel asked. "Some of these women will have children with them. Nursery upstairs, a schoolroom in the back. You could teach them, Samuel, not just reading and writing, but practical things. How to keep books, how to write letters, how to find work." As they explored the property, Samuel began to see the vision Mary Catherine was painting. It wasn't just a refuge, it was a new life, a new calling, a new way to serve God and their community. "There's one more thing," Mary Catherine said as they stood on the front porch watching the sun set over the prairie. "I want us to use our real story. I want to tell these women about us, about how love can survive separation and mistakes, and even 20 years of loss. I want them to know that second chances are real. Samuel pulled her closer, marveling at this woman who had turned her pain into purpose, her suffering into strength. You really think we can do this? He asked. Build something meaningful. Out of the wreckage of our old lives? I think, Mary Catherine said, leaning into his embrace, that's exactly what love is supposed to do. Transform the broken places into something beautiful.